yours are in Nasser?
Well, Hausa people don't want to go out of the country like Yoruba people. Yeah, in Yoruba is like so there is some opportunity they have that is not like they take advantage of it. But the Hausa people are very traditional, they're very free. So they don't want to go out. From London. Yeah, so it's different in London. Yeah.
محمد اهلا وسهلا.
كيف الحال brother? How are you?
الحمد لله.
Alhamdulillah.
Like almost everyone is here.
السلام عليكم.
I'm fine, and you? Alhamdulillah.
My good news is nice.
Nice.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So over here, these are 4 ways that we said that you can do what?
Grade or scrutinize or analyze loan reports?
Loan reports, right? So basically we're talking about shudud here. When you have a loan report, how do you deal with it? Right? When you have a singular chain or a singular narration from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how do you grade it? And this is very important. So we had finished the first. Did we finish the second? We finished like we're doing tabaqa today, or did we did it last time? Okay, خلاص, inshallah. So the first two are pretty clear. So umum al-balwa, right? So what is the idea behind this?
Filter out issues that have more evidence. So it's an important issue that we all face, like halal, haram, and and things like that.
Yeah.
We should have actually stronger evidence, so we should just leave.
Sure. So the thing is, if we have a loan report that goes against something that is generally well known, then that's a reason to it's a reason to reject that report. Good. Over here, precision. We said that this is a second reason that I can use to reject or accept. How?
Because it has less errors than correct ideas.
Okay. What has less errors?
If something is precise, it means it has more facts or more correct things than errors.
What?
The narration in the hadith.
The narration? So how do I determine if if the narration talks about more things?
No, I mean less. It has less errors. Like the more errors, the less precise it is. That's what I meant.
How do I determine that?
If it agrees with the hadith of other scholars.
But we're talking about loan narration. We're talking about shad hadith, so it's not possible to compare it to anything. So what is he talking about? When I compare it to other hadith, what kind of hadith is that? Because these are important means to help me judge, like you guys said in the beginning, when I have a loan report. طيب, when I have the ability to compare, it's this category, does it still apply? No, right? This category is gone. It's out the window because it's not a loan report. So when I have it, when I can actually compare it, and I find a mistake, what do we call that? We call that a hidden defect. We call that an illah. Right? Because I'm able to actually, now I can superimpose and be like, okay, no, there's a mistake here. This isn't right. That category, we're done. We're talking about a new category here. So when the precision here, I have nothing to compare it to, what do I do?
So I remember, there's levels of narrators.
Ahsant. Right? So we're talking, here it's about the narrator, not about the narration, right? So the narrator is what's important here and how precise he is. How do I determine how precise the narrator is?
So one, I look at the scholars who do critics.
Ahsant, good. So I go back to the famous hadith critics, right? The nuqad. And then I see what do they say about this particular narrator. What else can I do? If I don't have too much, for example, if I don't have anything or enough information that actually talks about this narrator, is that reason enough for me to reject his narrations? No. So what else can I do?
narrated other narrations
Okay.
which agrees
Uh,
with other people.
Perfect. Walaikum salam. So what I can do is I can actually look at this narrator, and what do? Is I go through all of the books of hadith and I look for what? I look for his narrations, right? This is called a sabra wa takhassi, where I go through and I gather all of this individual's narrations. And what is the purpose of me gathering this narrator's narrations?
To see if he is consistent.
To see if he's consistent, right? And if he's consistent in his narrations, and I find that over here, okay, no, well, a vast majority of the hadith that he actually narrates, there are people who corroborate what it is that he's narrating. That gives me an indication that he's what? At the least. At the least that he's suduq, right? That at the least that this individual is truthful. Can I grade him to be thiqah? Can I grade him to be reliable? And this is something we'll talk about more about when we talk about jarh wa ta'dil.
Maybe you could though.
Ala hasab, right? It's very difficult for me to say a narrator is thiqah if he doesn't have any narrations in the major books of Sunan. Right? If I don't have any kalam, or if I don't have any speech of the scholars of hadith speaking about him, right? And his narrations are in very unique places, right? So it's difficult for me to say he's thiqah because those narrators that are thiqah, their narrations are already set and they're established. So, but like I said, this is more when we talk about jarh wa ta'dil, which is another, inshallah, science that we will indefinitely encompass and talk about. The purpose of this part of the course is just to talk about the logical premise or the rational reasoning for the hadith scholars to put these conditions forward. That's all. So this is how I determine precision, right? And this is what helps me determine if I can take his hadith and make it acceptable or reject it. Tabaqa. So when I talk about tabaqa, what does that mean?
The duration of hadith.
Duration. What meaning?
Or when it happened.
When it happened. When the hadith happened, okay? So a hadith that happened in Mecca versus a hadith that happened in Medina, like that?
No, not where, when.
Yeah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he lived in Mecca before he lived in Medina, right? So how does that help me? With loan reports.
So in each, there is some layers. So from the Prophet,
Uh-huh.
and then his students,
Mm.
and then their students. Like
Yeah.
So I'm looking at which layer
Good.
is this
So
happening.
at what point in the chain did this narration become a loan report or did it become an individual report? This is a very important question. Yes.
Or also because the Prophet ﷺ, he lived his life in Mecca before Al-Hijrah. Like most of his life in Mecca was before Al-Hijrah. And then after Al-Hijrah, the rest of his life, not all of it, the rest of his life was in Medina.
So how does that help me deal with loan reports?
Because the spreading of Islam occurred after Mecca, mostly. Not there was a period that happened in Mecca, but mostly it was in Medina. Maybe that's one.
Okay, so if I know that I have more narrations after Medina, how does that help me with loan reports?
After Hijrah, not specifically after Medina.
Sure. How does that help me with loan reports?
Like you could tell events that happened during the Prophet's life.
Sure. How does that help me with loan reports?
Just can you define loan reports so I can
I have an individual chain. The thing we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks.
Okay, so like I said, if
Yeah.
Nabi Sallallahu
Sallallahu
had more events happen in his life, we can tell that it's because of the more years of the Hijrah. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Like in Medina,
Yes.
he had more events occurring
Uh-huh.
than in Mecca.
Okay. So how does that deal with a loan chain? If I have a singular chain, how does that help me?
We can analyze more events that happened during the Nabi Sallallahu.
So you're saying that we compare it?
Not compare, not necessarily compare, but we analyze.
Sure. How do you analyze?
Yeah, we look at Nabi Sallallahu timeline, 63 years of his life.
Sure.
In his 50th year,
Uh-huh.
what was he doing?
Let's say he got
Ahl al-Ta'if. He was
Uh-huh.
making dua for Ahl al-Ta'if.
Okay.
In his 55th year, or maybe his 57th
Sure.
year, he was doing Hajj.
Sure.
This is what we analyze.
Dave, so I have a loan report.
No.
What do I do with it? And what does that have to do with the tabaqa now?
I said analyze his life. That's what I literally said.
So you're saying look at his seerah, but what does that have to do with the tabaqa?
The tabaqa means at which point in the chain did the loan report happen?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just answered the question.
No, you didn't. تفضل. The question was, what is a tabaqa? And how does that help me deal with loan reports? Yeah, a tabaqa is at the station, at the chain of where.
The stage.
Yeah, so you have different stages for the chain, and here, so this is Umum al-Balwa, which we did and we completed. And then we did how to deal with weak hadith, and where it applies and where it doesn't apply. Then we talked about the precision, right? And then the different methodology or the different means that we deal with these individual reports and when they can be rejected or not. And we said here that if a narrator, is this narrator strong enough to support this narration? We said yes or no, and we also said what was unique about this?
They can be both.
Right? So it can be the same narrator. It can be the same narrator, meaning that in this situation, the lone narrator, he's strong enough to support the report, but in this situation, he's not strong enough to support the report. The other thing, we talked about munkar, we talked about suduq, we talked about a number of case studies that supported this idea. And today, like I said, we're going to talk about the tabaqa. So the likelihood of a lone narration being accepted, it increases as one moves up the chain. So where is up? Toward the Prophet ﷺ or away from him? Toward the Prophet ﷺ. So as we move up toward the Prophet ﷺ, the likelihood of having just one person narrate, does it go up or does it go down? And I want you to think. It goes up, right? The likelihood, for example, of a companion sitting with the Prophet ﷺ and it's just them two. Does that happen? Huh? There's a very high chance. It happens. The Prophet ﷺ, you have specific narrations where it was just the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Hurairah. Or you have specific narrations where the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr alone. You have specific narrations where the Prophet ﷺ and Mu'adh. You have specific narrations where he is talking to individual people, where he's talking to Aisha, where he's talking to Salama, right? You have these narrations where it's just him and that person. Is it possible that other people narrate it?
Yeah. Yes.
It is possible, but the chances are what?
Very low.
The chances are very low, right?
Why?
Because,
But why?
Because nobody else was there.
Because they're not close to him.
But there were people that were close to the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They could narrate it
So if they're not with them at the time, how could they have narrated it?
What do you mean?
If the Prophet ﷺ is alone with Abu Bakr on the Hijrah.
Abu Bakr, for example, would narrate it to his son, and then his son would narrate it to...
Sure, so he would narrate to one person.
But yeah, then the cycle continues. His son narrates the
Sure.
story to his grandchildren, for example.
His grandchildren. So you're saying here, and it goes right with what I'm saying. And you're agreeing with everything that I'm saying, and I appreciate that. But at the first stage, there's only one person.
Oh, yeah, you're just referring to the first stage.
I'm not. I'm referring to all the stages, and you agreed with me. You
Not
said
directly,
you said that he narrates to his son narrates to his grandchildren, right? So what happened? Where does that individual report come? It came individual at that first stage, but by the time it reaches the second or third stage, what happens?
It's not narrated.
It's not individual anymore, right? You have a bunch of people who are going forward and who are narrating that. So here, when you have situations where you have a person sitting alone with the Prophet ﷺ, or alone with him, or sometimes even if it's a group of companions, as we'll see what happens later on, is that if there's a group of companions, and just imagine, like over here, you guys are sitting with me, you're my students, who would you rely on to be like the class representative? The person who just came and joined today, or somebody who's been sitting longer? Right, so the person who's been sitting longer, and if he spoke or she spoke, everybody else would probably do what?
Listen.
They'd probably listen. They'd probably stay quiet, even though everybody heard the same thing. Is that a possibility? Absolutely. And the fact that they're quiet upon that is enough reason for us to even trust that report. And we have some narrations that actually come like that. So like I said, there are times where the Prophet ﷺ, just imagine, he was a person, he used to spend time with his companions, he used to spend time with his wives. Sometimes he would go out for a walk. Sometimes somebody would be accompanying him. Sometimes he would go out into the masjid, he would be making dua, he'd be doing all of these different situations. Sometimes one person would be with him, sometimes a group of people would be with him, right? So you have all of these different situations that allow for this idea or allow for this fact that you will have a singular report from each of these individual companions. Now, what happens after them is, like, if you have a companion now and he's narrating forward, what are the chances that he only narrates to one student? Is it just as high? No, it's not as high, but it's still a possibility, right? Now we reach the third level. Is it a possibility still? It is, but the possibility, right? So the further down the chain that we move, this possibility of lone reports is very low, right? And this is, again, this is part of the point of mentioning this and making this a point that, okay, can you have this? Based on where we see in the chain and where that lone narration happens, it helps give strength or it'll weaken this report. Because remember, we have nothing to what? We have nothing to corroborate it with. We have nothing to compare it to. تفضل.
My understanding is that, for example, when he spoke, what in which way, but there's
Yeah.
And that was a more accurate, the truth before the hadith. If,
Mhm.
you know, it passing, Abu Bakr passed to someone and then
Mhm.
Masarah passed to someone and
Mhm.
Aisha passed to someone and then it get legal or you don't know if that's right or what they say. But the one who individually he speaks, you know, like
No, no.
that was the most,
Yeah.
most accurate. What
It's,
your
no. My point is not about accuracy. The point is, the further up the chain we move toward the Prophet ﷺ, the likelihood of me accepting a singular report, it goes up. And the further down I go, like, so for example, if I come and I write a report, and between me and the Prophet ﷺ is 6 people, and I said, this is the only report on the issue, and I have the singular chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ, how strong or how likely can we, you know what I mean, how would we take this report? How would you take this report? If I came to you and I'll say, hey, listen, I have this hadith between me and the Prophet ﷺ is 6 people. It's like, okay, well, what's the hadith? The Prophet ﷺ, he walked to this place or he went to this place, and I don't have any other hadith. I don't have hadith that support it. I don't have hadith that are against it.
And then you say there was a like that. You were with a group of people.
No, it's one person.
One
One person,
person.
one person, one person, one person, one
Passed
person.
on to another.
Yes. Now, what is the likelihood of this hadith being
Moving around.
true and authentic? Do you think it's a high chance or you think it's a low chance?
It's high chance.
It's a very low chance.
Low chance.
How-
Okay, low chance,
how-
no.
how's it- yeah.
Low chance because it was.
How can you only have one person in every single point in the chain?
Yeah, it's a low.
Right? Because you would have people who are going to narrate, like it's not possible that it just went to one person. It's more likely that it's going to. The further down you go, the more the hadith and the more the chain is going to branch. Like just like you guys know what like a pyramid scheme is? So you know you have one person, they give it to 2 people, and then these 2 people they give it to 4, and these 4 they give it to 8, etc. You know, and it just gives it's like a hierarchy, exactly.
Better example is a family tree.
Or a family tree, unless they don't have any kids, right? So, is it also possible that a companion did not narrate hadith knowingly?
Yes.
Yeah, most of them.
Most? Okay.
But Sheikh, for example, like he said,
Uh-huh.
if Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu passed the hadith, for example, to one of his children,
Yeah.
and they misheard a Sahabi Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu.
Yeah.
Now we have to rely on someone from 1500 years or more who narrated the hadith. So can you imagine, just because he misheard the hadith, that now we might get the information incorrectly because of one person? Does that make sense? So it's possible, yeah.
Okay. Is it possible? Yes.
Sorry, what was
This is the question. I'm sorry. Is it possible that a companion did not narrate a hadith knowingly? Meaning the Prophet ﷺ told him something and then he did not carry it forward.
Oh,
Yes,
no.
did not narrate.
It is or no? All right, who says yes?
Yes, possible.
Yes, possible. And, all right, who says no?
I say yes and no. Because
I say no.
because
Uh-huh.
if it's specific to himself,
Yeah.
he will keep it. But such a situation will arise,
Uh-huh.
he will have to say it.
Okay.
So I would say
Well,
the chances are very low.
We'll talk about the circumstances and then you guys can tell me. Yes.
Is it also possible that you forget the hadith?
Is it possible that someone forgot that what they heard or saw from the Prophet ﷺ? Absolutely. They're human beings. You know what I mean? There's nobody's saying that they're Masum.
Knowingly.
Yeah. But over here I'm saying knowingly.
Yeah.
Right? This is not forgetfulness.
So
So
maybe
he knows the hadith vividly, and for some
Yes.
reason decided.
He was sitting there, he heard the Prophet ﷺ say XYZ, and he decided, no.
It's totally possible.
You think it's possible? Okay. Yes. It is possible. And for a number of reasons. Why?
I explained it.
So his specific narration did not reach us. Does that make sense?
That means they might forget or might not share. They
No.
might not share.
Meaning that if you have a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said something, and there are 1, 2, 3 companions who narrated it, but we only heard the narration through means of one companion, and these other chains died off. Is that possible? Yes, absolutely. The other one, he did not feel a need. Why did he not feel the need? Because he heard someone else narrate it. And that's good enough for him, right? If a companion hears someone else narrate a hadith, is he going to feel the need to come and like narrate it also? No, not necessarily.
Unless there was lying later on.
Later on is possible if they want to corroborate something that the other companion said, to let them know, like, no, Ibn Abbas actually did narrate that, or Abu Hurairah actually did narrate that.
They can use it for confirmation.
They can use it for confirmation or corroboration, and there are a couple of cases of this. He was busy with other duties. Like, how come Abu Bakr doesn't have a lot of narrations?
Because he was busy.
He was busy with the Khilafah. Khalid bin Walid, why didn't he have a lot? He was busy in jihad, right? You know what I mean? Like, so you have companions who were busy with other things. Sometimes some of them were heads of state, some of them were in charge of zakat al-mal, some of them were in charge of leading, some of them were in charge, or some of them were just busy with other things, and they didn't have the opportunity to actually narrate. They died early. And what do I mean by this? They died before the Prophet ﷺ. So if a person dies before the Prophet ﷺ, what are the chances of him narrating a hadith? Zero, right? He can't, because the Prophet ﷺ had already passed by that point. Any questions on any of these? Tfaddal.
Yes, in the first part, his
Yeah.
narration did not reach out.
Yeah.
But is that from him or from the people who did not pass it?
Yeah, so here, what I'm talking about, he didn't narrate it knowingly. Yeah, that's true. This is from after him.
Yeah.
This is not from him.
It's not his fault.
It's not his fault.
Yeah.
It's not his fault. Sah, jazakallah khair. I'll make a note of that. So the possibility of reliability of loan reports, and like we said, based on the tabaqah, over here the reliability is relatively high. And as we go to the tabi, his student, it goes down. We go atba' tabi'in, and even later, it just keeps going down, right? There's a downward trajectory to the acceptance of such reports. Yes.
So Sheikh, for example, in Islam, we could have information we know today that might not be true because of people narrating the information incorrectly. Oh, not specifically. Does that make sense? Yeah, some things we know today.
Somebody lied.
No, not somebody. Not
or somebody was mistaken. Okay, somebody was mistaken.
Was not specific.
Yahi, it's one of the two. Either they lied or they were mistaken.
Yeah.
Which one?
It could be both.
Okay.
Or it could be one of them, I mean.
Mashi. So what do you think we've been doing this entire course?
We've been analyzing.
No. We've been removing this possibility that you're talking about.
Which is?
Either that it's a lie or that's a mistake.
Both possibilities.
That we've been removing, that either it's a lie or a mistake.
Okay.
And this is the last stage that we're here at. Right? So all of the possibilities you're talking about, these questions make sense when we first started. At this point, unless you don't trust the manhaj.
But why doesn't it make sense?
Because these are questions. This is the question that we were trying to answer from when we started the class. Like 6 weeks ago.
Okay, but
it's not a question so that question is good, like I said 6 weeks ago. That question is not appropriate today.
But you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I'm saying this is not the time for that question. And if you have a problem with the methodology, then you're going to have to go back to the earlier videos, because these are beginning questions. These are not questions at this point. Either there's a problem in the way that I relate it, which is a possibility, or you didn't understand, or you weren't present. Right? So these are the three possibilities that are there. Imam al-Dhahabi, he said, if an individual from those reliable narrators with precise memory narrates a loan report, again, we've already fulfilled the conditions here in what? When I talk about this part, what are the conditions that we've already fulfilled?
It's connected.
Right, it's connected, trustworthy, and precise. This person, when we say reliable, this is somebody who is thiqa. Right, this is somebody who is thiqa. So he says, if he has a loan report, if he is a tabi, then we can still what? We can still take his loan reports. If he is a tabi, then it is strange and unique. It's a gharib fard. As at this level, unique narrations are what? Rare. An imam at this level would have 100,000 hadith, and you would be hard pressed to find 2 or 3 unique narrations. This is how rare it becomes. So out of 100,000, if you take 2 or 3, what does the percentage look like?
0.0.
Right? It's less than 1%. It's less than 1%. Which is why when they would come across these narrations, usually they would do what with them? They would weaken them and they would throw them away. This is 2 generations after him. These are 2 tabaqah after the Prophet.
Yeah, but the tabi'i, some of them
This is atba' tabi. This is not tabi.
I'm talking about, yeah, the difference between tabi and tabi.
Yeah, this is a student of a tabi'i.
Yeah, but a student of the tabi'i could have
Here.
made it.
Yeah, the level we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the
Okay.
second one. Okay.
As for those that follow, which are their students, where would they even find unique reports? Where would they even come across them?
From the tabi'.
How would they know of them or even come across them? And over here, he's talking from this yani min bab ujab. He's not saying, like, he's not asking you the question, right? It's a rhetorical question. It's not possible that they would even be able to come across these reports. Then on to one who is aware, a relatively reliable student, one that would be considered reliable. Yani, how is it possible that you'd have a thiqa narrating such narrations? It doesn't make sense. Such a narrator would make up the majority of narrators in the Sahihain, and their students, if they came with a unique text, then those narrations would be found in the remaining Sahih. Meaning that all of the narrations by this point, by this level, what is he saying? You would have known. At this point, the narrations have been recorded. And this is what Imam al-Dhahabi is saying. By this point, the narrations would be recorded, and all of the reliable narrators, where can I find them?
From the tabi'.
I can find them in the Sahihain. I can find them in the Sahihain. And even if is every thiqa narrator in the Sahihain? No. He's saying that if you don't find them in Sahihain, it's okay. You will still find them in the remaining Sahih. In the rest of the encyclopedia, where the narrators are considered to be thiqa and they're considered to be reliable, everything has been recorded by this point. He's saying it is impossible to what? To find the loan report by this level and by this point.
Sheikh, just one thing. Can you correct me if I'm wrong about the previous slide? The tabi, can you go back to the previous slide? A tabi, their hadith are sound because they were living during the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time. Is that right or wrong?
No. Companions were living during the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. These are students of the companions.
Then why is their hadith sound?
Because there's still a chance that you have loan reports at this stage.
Because it's not because the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was alive during that time.
No.
Okay.
Many hadith critics would resist grading a strange gharib report as sahih for the students of reliable narrators, even though you find some examples of this in the books of Sihah. Again, why? Because by this point, Imam al-Dhahabi says the possibility of having a lone or unique report is what? Is zero. Not just low, he's saying it's impossible. Some great scholars of hadith would grade hadith that are unique, like the hadith of Hushaym and Hafs ibn Ghiyath, as munkar. So by the time it reaches that point, even if you have these thiqa narrators, right? These are accepted narrators. They said by the time it reaches this point, even if their loan reports, they would say no, we don't take them, we don't accept them.
So they were sifted already.
They're clean, but the narrations are what? Are rejected. Why?
Because they're so low down the chain.
Because they're too low down the chain. They're too far down the chain for it. It doesn't make sense that by this point, it doesn't make sense that you would have these lone existing reports. If it was from the levels of the teachers of the Imams, they would use nakara to describe these unique reports, like the hadith of Uthman ibn Abi Shayba, Abu Salama at-Tabudhaki, saying that these are rejected. Again, it's the same thing, man. Like even if these people were at the levels of Imams, it was not enough because it was just too low down the chain. If the narrated hadith are from those unique rejected ones, they would take it as a sign and weaken the narrator's hadith and restrain from grading him reliable. Meaning that if you found this narrator, even if he is suduq, if all he narrates are these weird narrations, what do you do? Then you have to question him. Be like, okay, why is he focusing so much on these strange, unique reports? That is enough for me as a hadith critic to do what with this narrator? To lower his standing and to weaken him. If he realized his error and stopped narrating. So sometimes they realize what's going on, right? Sometimes they're like, okay, man, you know what? I just keep looking for these strange reports. Because what happened is there was a culture during the era, like during the early collection of hadith, what would they do? They want the unique ones. So they would go and they would seek these unique reports. And then there came a point that some of them actually realized, like, whoa, what I'm doing is what? Yeah, no, it's not right. This is working against me. This is actually a huge problem. So he would stop doing it. And at that point, he would return back to being thiqa and trustworthy.
Damage control.
Yeah, he would do his own damage control. Imam al-Bazzar, he mentioned his musnad. Just a latifa here. You guys, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this book, but it's called Musnad al-Bazzar. Right, why would anyone name a book after themselves? So anyway, we we heard Umar ibn Abi Shayba, which is one of the narrators that was mentioned previously, say, we heard Al-Husayn ibn Hafs, again, another narrator that we mentioned previously. We heard Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam, Kabir, on the authority of Zayd, on the authority of Marra, on the authority of Abdullah, who said that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, you will be raised barefoot, naked, and uncircumcised. Is this strange? Is this matan? Is it familiar or no?
I think that's in the Day of Judgment.
It's on the Day of Judgment. That's exactly what it's talking
It's
about.
not one on two.
No. This is on the raised. Yani, who's going to be raised like that, man?
Yeah.
No, it's talking about raised. Yani, you will be reanimated
Yeah.
in this form.
The same way
Is
like-
this strange? Is this text strange? No, not really. Right? This is actually something that we're Islamically, it's part of our eschatology. This is something that is very normal. It's something that we expected, that on the Day of Judgment we will be raised naked, we will be raised barefoot, and we will be raised uncircumcised. So Al-Bizar said, he said this hadith is not known to be narrated by Abdullah except by this route. So what is he saying here?
That he's the only one.
He's saying that he's the only one. Automatically, a red flag should go up that this hadith is what? This is a lone report. That this is a fard report, this is a lone report. And I feel that Umar ibn Abi Shayba made a mistake because no one else follows him in this narration. So now he's using outside comparative resources to say that, all right, the problem comes here in the chain. There's a problem here because nobody else, the rest of the chain, nobody else narrates it like this. The correct narration is on the authority of Athawri, with his wording on the authority of Al-Mughira ibn al-Nu'man, on the authority of Sa'id ibn Jubair, on the authority of Ibn Abbas. So what happened is that Umar ibn Abi Shayba, what happened is he probably made a mistake and put a wrong isnad on top of a correct narration and a correct matan. And how does Bazzar know that? He says, because this is actually the chain that is connected to that matan. This is the chain that's supposed to be connected to that matan, and that's why this narration is to be rejected. Tafadhal.
So if we visualize this like as
Yeah.
like 1, 2, 3 levels of the chain,
Yeah.
right? Umar Shayba, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's say he's on the third level, right,
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
Right, and then Bazar is fourth. Is that how?
Bazzar he's at the end of the chain, right?
He's at the end of the
Because he's the one who recorded it.
Okay, so he's at the end of the chain. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we're on level 3 where Umar is, right?
Mhm.
And then, so essentially what you're saying is the correct narration on the authority of Al-Dawri, he is one before, or he is on that same level of the chain and heard it from the same
So
person, like that.
over here you have who? You have Abdullah ibn Abbas,
Yeah.
who narrates it on Marra. Marra is what? What level is he? He's a tabi, right? He's a tabi. And over here, Zayd, what level is Zayd on? Atba'a tabi. And then you have Sufyan, his student. Okay? You following? Okay, that's all. That's all that's going on here. So what happened is that Umar ibn Abi Shayba, he made the mistake, right? He made the mistake. He put the wrong isnad on the wrong hadith. And this is why Bazzar is like, he's like, that isnad doesn't go to that hadith.
Is he recent in Bazzar?
No, he's very early. He's during the time of Tadween. So he says like, no, there's a mistake here. And the fact that Bazzar's teacher is alone in this report is enough reason for him to doubt its authenticity. So who is he essentially doubting? Who is he doubting? And between Umar and Al-Bazzar is who? No one. He had no problem what? He had no problem critiquing his teacher. Al-Hafiz Abu Muhammad ibn Ishaq al-Karabisi, Al-Hakim al-Kabir, he narrates that one of the reasons his sheikh, Al-Hafiz Abu Aruba al-Hirani, for his rejection of hadith, that was a lone report from one lone narrator, later narrator, even the chain was apparently clean and sound. So he said, Abu Aruba said to me in Hiran, so over here, this is a conversation between these two, right? Abu Ahmed, it has reached me that a sheikh in Baghdad narrates on Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Qat'i on the authority of Asim ibn Hilal al-Bariqi, on the authority of Ayyub, on the authority of Nafi', on the authority of Ibn Umar, that the Prophet ﷺ said, there is no divorce or manumission with those that you do not own. I said, yes. We heard Yahya ibn Muhammad al-Sa'id al-Hafiz, who heard it from Muhammad ibn Yahya, this narration. He said, Abu Ahmed, don't do anything. If this hadith was Ayyub's narration, if this hadith was Ayyub's, narrated on the authority of Nafi', then the people over the past 200 years would have utilized it by means of Amr ibn Shu'ayd on his father, on his grandfather's authority. He's saying that if there was to be a lone report in this, then this is the only lone report that can be found. As for a lone report here, there's no reason to act on it. And what does he say here? He said, you think, what have people been doing for the past 200 years? You're just finding this now? Does that make sense? It's wrong. We heard Abu Hafs, Amr ibn Ibrahim ibn Kathir al-Buqri in Baghdad, and I asked him, we heard Yahya ibn Sa'id narrate this. Ibn Sa'id said, I do not know of a defect in this hadith. Now, going back, this hadith here, you have another scholar saying that I don't know of a defect in this hadith. Meaning that the chain is what?
You said the chain is
Essentially the chain is sound.
Yes.
Essentially the chain is sound. I'm sorry. Yeah, so over here, like, essentially the chain is sound, but it's reason enough for the hadith to be rejected. All right, so these are just some examples of how to deal with the students, with the precision of the tabaqa of the narrator. So the next part talks about the students of these different mashayikh and these different muhaddithin and when they narrate from them. So we said here, the likelihood of a student that studies with the shaykh to narrate a unique report on him, even though he sat with him for a short time or a handful or even once, is quite low. Versus more senior students that might have sat with the shaykh significantly longer. And from them, you're going to have those who are more precise. From them, you're going to have those who are more intelligent. From them, you're going to have those who are more eager. And from those students, there are those individually that outshine other students. It's very natural, right? When you have a group of students, you have some students that are naturally what? Better. They're more intelligent, they're more learned, they're more haris, they're more eager to learn all of these things. So the likelihood of what diminishes significantly?
And they said a long time in the loan report.
These loan reports. Right, so having this loan report on the shaykh, like from the student, you have this one student who sat with him for a few days, and all of a sudden he has these 2 or 3 hadith that none of his other students narrate. Does that make sense? No. Huh? There's a huge question mark. There's a huge question. Is it possibility that, maybe he visited him and he sat in his house and there's a few hadith that he gave him? Right, and then he didn't tell the rest of his students?
It's a bit of a stretch.
Right, it's a huge stretch. Right, it's a huge stretch. And like we said, the likelihood it diminishes significantly that we can even trust this report. In addition to the fact that the narrations of the shaykh himself are limited, right? There are only so many hadith that a shaykh can have. And we're at a point in time now, when we're talking about this, that all of his hadith are where? Huh? They're recorded, right? They've been recorded in some way, shape, or form. And when he wants to give ijazah, when he wants to sit with someone, when he wants someone to benefit from them, they would already have what with them? Right, they would have a copy of his narrations, and they would bring this copy of narrations to him, and from them, every time they heard the shaykh say something, they would like fill it in, and if they didn't hear it, they would skip over it, etc. And we had talked about these different ways on how the different scholars had actually recorded these different ahadith. So Imam Muslim, he says in his introduction to Sahih, and this is something that I think we read it the other day. As for those who you see resorting to the likes of Zuhri, and Imam Zuhri, Imam, Kabir, Hafiz, Muhaddith, due to his greatness and due to the great number of his companions being amongst the precise Hufaz, resorting to his hadith and the hadith of those like him or the likes of Hisham ibn Urwa, then their hadith are extensively shared among the people of knowledge. Meaning, if Zuhri narrates something and somebody else, he looks at the hadith, he'll know automatically that this hadith is from what? These are from, not from a scholar, that this hadith is from the hadith of who? Imam Zuhri. Or Hisham ibn Urwa. Because again, we had talked about this before, that there are certain narrations and certain hadith that certain scholars are known to have narrated, right? There are certain categories of a hadith that certain scholars would actually specialize in. And this is not something that's strange, because when we had talked about, there are certain narrators where even Imam Malik and other them, they said rely on him in what? And we had mentioned this before. Which science? Like Ibn Ishaq. Rely on him in seerah, but don't rely on him in ahkam. So, do you have scholars specializing in particular sciences, in particular fields, in particular types of narrations? Absolutely. So they would actually be able to tell who narrated what, just from the category or from the type of hadith. So the greater majority of the companions relayed their hadith in agreement with one another, meaning that you have what?
in agreement with one another?
Yes. So now, how many?
Consensus or-
No. Oh, mashallah.
They reference from each other.
They can reference from each other. They have corroborating narrations, right? So I actually have narrations I can do what with now?
So even if it's not that companion specific niche.
No, we're not talking about the companion now. We're talking about students that came later. So what basically is going on here is you have a student and he has multiple narrations, and those narrations can be found between who? Between the students, right? Between the students. And when I have narrations between the students, I have what now? I can compare. I have corroborating reports. So thus, to transmit from Urwa and Zuhri, or one of them from among the multitude of a hadith, what is known among many of their companions, and the Rawi is not of those who share in his Sahih narrations, then it is not allowed to accept the narrations of this category of people, and Allah surely knows best. So he's saying that if you find someone who is narrating something separate and different from the rest of the students of the Shaykh, then what should I do with this lone narration? I should reject it. Because the chances of the Shaykh giving this person 2 or 3 or a handful of reports is extremely low to almost 0. Some more examples. Imam Muslim, he applies this hadith for a reliable thiqa narrator named Jarir ibn Hazm. So he narrates on Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, saying that no one narrates his hadith on Yahya except Jarir ibn Hazm. Jarir does not have many narrations on Yahya. He actually only narrates an insignificant amount, and even those are mistaken and questionable. So over here, he says Jarir is good. Jarir is somebody who is an acceptable narrator, but when it comes to his narrations on Yahya, they are what? They're mistaken. They're to be rejected. Why?
Maybe he was not taught by Yahya.
Okay, you're almost there.
He didn't get the info correctly.
He didn't sit with Yahya long enough. He didn't sit. He might have sat with him for a day or two. He might have taken some narrations, but was he able to capture the knowledge of Yahya? No, he wasn't. Why? And how do we know that? Because he himself is what? He's reliable. He's thiqa. Ibn Adi, he has a very famous book called Al-Kamil fi Du'afa, right? It's a book on weak narrators in general. So he says concerning Al-Hurr ibn Malik, and he says a truthful Saduq narrator, his lone narration on Imam Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj, that no one narrates this on Shu'bah except Al-Hurr with this particular chain. And Hurr does not have many hadith from him, or others for that matter. As for this chain in particular, then it is munkar, it is rejected. So I said here that Ibn Adi, he narrates this in his Al-Kamil fi Du'afa, in his book of weak narrators. What is the problem with this example?
Because he is saying he's Saduq.
Right? So over here, it says that he's Saduq, but is this Ibn Adi's kalam? No, this is mine. So how do we deal with this? Because Uthman made a very good point. If Ibn Adi is putting this narrator in his book of weak narrators, then the first thing that we should understand is what? That he's a weak narrator. And his rejection, his narrations are going to be what? They're going to be weak anyway. So here, how do we know that he wasn't a weak narrator? Because Ibn Hajar, he actually grades him as truthful, and he cites Ibn Adi. He cites Ibn Adi, saying that this person is narrated by Ibn Adi, but he is truthful. He is Suduq, he is a truthful narrator. Also, Ibn Hajar, he says in his Nataj al-Afkar, that this agrees with what Muslim says in his introduction to Sahih, when he says the signs of a rejected or munkar hadith is when a narrator purposely narrates on a Zuhri with the sheer number of narrations and narrators that narrate from him with something that none of them narrated. So again, he's just explaining and expanding on this idea that you can't have lone individual students narrating these hadith from great scholars who have such depth, who have such insight, and who have so many narrations. How is it possible that they have all these great students, and then you, the student who came and sat with him for 10 minutes, you have all of these strange narrations from him? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like why do some weak narrators act like journalists?
Huh?
You see, like some.
So we had talked about this before. What are the motivations for people to narrate weak hadith? What are the motivations for people to fabricate hadith? What are the motivations? What were their motivations? We said there were two.
Either they want to propagate
They want to propagate their belief system. Good.
Just like a journalist.
Or what? Huh? Yeah. No. I'm saying, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. When it talks about actually when we talk about bringing news and information to people, nothing's changed. The motivations are the same. It's either one of two. And we said either to propagate a belief or for what? Or to get famous, for fame and status. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So, this is actually the last part of alhamdulillah, we finished the first section. We will be moving on bi'idhnillah to the next section, which is more a discussion of, we'll get more into a little bit of jarh wa ta'dil after I talk about tadween. So the big next section that I actually want to discuss is tadween and how the sunnah was actually compiled. Right? Because that's a very important part of this. Now that we understand that the methodology of the muhaddithin is sound, regardless of what Muhammad thinks, right? Like
That's not what I think. It's what other Muslims also think. It's not just me.
Okay, so Muhammad and other Muslims think, right? Like, yeah. So the thing is, like, now that we've established that it's sound, the next step is to actually go and deal historically. How was the sunnah put together? So it's a valid question. How was it put together? How was it compiled? How was it recorded? These are all things that are very important. There are a couple things that I do want all of us to take away from the discussion that we've had over the past few weeks. Number one, to appreciate the work that the muhaddithin have put forward. To appreciate the work that the scholars of hadith had done. It was tireless work, tireless effort. These men would travel from place to place. They would ask about people. They had sleepless nights. Some of them didn't have access to food and drink, but they would give all of those things up in the preservation of the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you can see that in the efforts and the work that have reached us today. Also understanding that this is a rational, logical method of approaching a hadith, right? This is not something that was just random and that they came up with. If we went through the steps one by one, and we'll review them inshallah. So over here, it's logical that they put forward these logical reasons on how you can accept or reject a narration. That their job was not to bring 100% surety, but to what? Minimize risk, right? They wanted to minimize risk, and they wanted to lower the percentage and chances that this hadith was trying to protect it from two things. It's right, either it's a mistake or a lie.
A lot of people don't know that mistakes are still ultimately possible. They think it's.
I mean, well, I don't know.
They think absolute certainty.
So we said that the first condition for a hadith to be sahih, to be sound, is what? That we need to trust the narrator. And when we trust the narrator, this removes the possibility of him lying. So what is the next condition? That he be precise, that he have dhabt. And why? Because we want to minimize the possibility for mistakes. And the next is what? Ittisal al-sanad. I need to make sure that this is at every level of the chain. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's a completion of the previous two conditions. I need to make sure, okay, yes, he's not lying and he's not mistaken. The next guy, he's also not lying and not mistaken. And so on and so forth. The next condition, defects. So when I compare his report to other reports, I don't find what? I don't find inconsistencies. I need to make sure that when I compare this narration to other narrations, that they are consistent in what it is that they're narrating. If I don't have anything to compare it to, if it's a lone report, what do I do then? Right? We had talked about the 4 steps, the 4 means that the scholars of hadith use to grade these lone reports to help them determine, is it actually a mistake or not? So what was one of the conditions? We'll go through them. Umum al-balwa. To make sure, if this is something that is well known, is it possible that you would have a lone narration that says, oh, zakah is actually 3%? No. Or there's a 6th pillar, there's a 6th prayer that nobody knows about? Okay, why? Why would you reject it immediately?
Because it's the only thing that goes against it, and it's not even never heard.
I'm sorry? Well, because it's not something, it was unheard. It's not something, it's something that's unheard of. You have an overwhelming number of narrations that talk about what? How much zakat is supposed to be. You have an overwhelming of narrations that talk about the number of prayers. And all of a sudden now you have one report that goes against all that, right? It doesn't make sense. Dave, the second thing that we talked about, what else can I look for in order to help me deem a lone report sound or fabrication?
Is the narrator precise?
How precise is the narrator who's narrating? All right, is it possible that he took a lone report? Yeah, it is. And this is where we actually look at his precision. And this is where we would actually go and look and study what the different scholars have to say about it. And we would also study what? We would actually study his other narrations. What else can I look at? And we talked about 2 today. We look at the tabaqah. Where does this lone report happen? Does it happen earlier in the chain, or does it happen later in the chain? And again, that can give me confidence or a lack of confidence in the report. And the last, in the students, right? Looking at what student is narrating it. Because this is something that is going to tell us on whether that can be trusted or not. If he's from his well-known students and it's a lone report, the possibility of this being true is what? Is definitely higher. And if it's like a student that came and sat with him for a short time, the chances, they definitely go down. And all of these steps encompass all reasonable possibilities. So if we combine all of these steps together, there's nothing more we can add to this. And if we tried to take away, that would actually do what? If we took away one of these steps, if we took away from one of these conditions, right, it opens the door for more mistakes. Because remember, we said that from this point onward, this point, we've already removed what? The possibility of lying. All of these remaining steps, the goal is to what? To minimize mistakes.
So this is a procedure.
This is a clear procedure. And it's logical, it's rational. This is not something, again, this is not something that was just random. They randomly came up with like, okay, hey, what do you guys want to do about these hadith? Well, I got 5 conditions, what do you think? Right? No, like these things were very logically, they were well thought out, well planned. And like I said, there's nothing here that can be added to this to make it more sound. You can't add anything to this because all of the different possibilities have been dealt with at this point. And what are the possibilities of lying, the possibility of mistake, the possibility of mistakes when being compared to other reports, and even when you have lone reports, how to deal with those. It is a complete and walillahi alhamd, perfect logical system that the muhaddithin use in order to help and allow for the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have reached us today. And with that, inshallah, we've ended the first portion of the discussion again, which is the logical or rational understanding of the methodology of the muhaddithin. And bi'idhnillah, from next time we're going to talk about tadween, on how the hadith corpus was actually compiled. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amin.
How come this is not called hadith theology yet?
Huh? Yes. One second.
Yeah. How come it's not called hadith theology yet?
Hadith theology?
Yes.
Well, because they're waiting for you to come up with it.
Don't we call it like that? I mean, it sounds like it could fit any kind of terminology, right?
Yeah, I mean that's why they call hadith sciences, like, or in Arabic it's just ulum al-hadith, right? Because hadith is an Arabic term itself. Yes. Oh, never.
When the Prophet was alive, after he passed away, was no longer the hadith is that when he was alive was going up. As he passed away, and the hadith is
So part of our belief as Sunni Muslims is that all of the hadith that are relevant to us have reached us.
whether he passed away or whether he has.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And inshallah, and from the next series of classes, I'll prove to you and you'll believe me. Inshallah. Yeah. Okay. خلاص الحمد لله. تفضل. Yeah. Inshallah, after Salat al-Isha, we'll have our tazkiyah class. We encourage everyone to come back.
Oh, it's not going to be here.
It'll be here, inshallah.
Oh, yeah.
وصلى الله على خير خلق نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.